for the next panel here. We're going to be doing it on renewable energy, alternative power generating, mining. We have our first guest. Obviously, you heard Jason speak a little bit earlier. I'll give you a quick bio on him. Jason Williams is a Bitcoin miner, entrepreneur, and influencer. Jason started his career in healthcare as the founder for FastMed, which gave him extensive knowledge in healthcare, pharmaceutical, medical devices, and energy industries. He later built the world's first waste-to-energy crypto mine that can run on tires, car tires. Since then, he authored Hard Money You Can't F With, made multiple investments over $5 million, and is a dedicated humanitarian with over a decade in volunteering. Big round of applause for Jason, please.
Hold on. Testing.
Next up, we got Greg. Greg is up here with me already. Greg Beard has served as our chief executive officer, president, and co-chairman, board of directors since March 2021. Greg was the global head of natural resources, senior partner member of the management committee, and senior advisor at Apollo Global Management from 2010 to 2020. Prior to his time at Apollo, Greg was a senior managing director at Riverstone Holdings. He began his career as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, where he played an active role in energy sector principal investment activities. Big round of applause for Greg, please. Go ahead and come on up, everybody.
Thank you. Go on.
Next up, we have Max. Max Gilardi is a co-founder of the Ankava group of companies. Since starting Ankava in 2014, Max has built business across energy marketing, energy infrastructure, Bitcoin mining, and real estate. Max hosts the Talk Energy podcast, where he explores all segments of the energy industry, its history, and the current events shaping energy's future. Big round of applause.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Max. Appreciate it, guys.
Excited to be here, guys. Before I start, something throwing me off. Jason, I need a favor for you. Would you mind? Something feels off, and I can't put my finger on it. Okay, that's much better. All right, perfect.
Thanks for that.
I
was looking at my picture, too. I was like, I'm missing something. You don't mind if I keep them on, do you?
Yeah, you can keep on if you want. You don't have to.
All right,
I think the easiest thing to start with would just be, I think some of us know your guys' companies, but just kind of a overview of what you guys are doing on the Bitcoin mining front, and then we'll get into more specific questions here in a minute. Greg, if you want to go first.
Sure. My company is Stronghold Digital Mining, and we are a renewable source of energy because we are cleaning up the remnants of more than 100 years of coal mining in Pennsylvania. So we own today 2 power plants that were built in the early 90s that each one is about 85 megawatts of power capacity, but they were built just to clean up the billions of tons of waste coal that was left behind as a result of coal mining. So we go in and reclaim properties in partnership with the DEP and with the state, and we get paid for the removal of this waste,
right.
It's the biggest source of water pollution, or one of the biggest sources of water pollution in Pennsylvania. It has these things burn, like 800 of these piles, these sites. They burn uncontrolled and emit really nasty stuff into the environment. So it's we have, at the rate we're going, we have 30 years of this stuff of cleaning up to do. And the great part is it's a super cheap source of feedstock because it's free.
Right.
And our facilities cost about $500 million each to build, like purpose-built for this job. And we're using the power that we make is really a byproduct from reclamation. And as a result, it's super cheap. So we get the feedstock for essentially the trucking cost, and the resulting ash that comes out is a beneficial use ash, and the byproduct of power gives us a cost to make power of around 2 cents.
Wow.
And hopefully we can drive that cost down further as we continue to scale, and then the resulting cost to mine Bitcoin obviously is maybe $3,000 a coin at that price for power.
Yeah.
So I think we have the benefit of being a beneficial use. Like what we're doing is beneficial to the environment, not just merely neutral.
Sure.
And the cost is inexpensive.
Very good. Jason.
Yeah, Greg, that's awesome work, first of all. Yeah, bear with me as I take you on this tire journey. So we do a lot of this similar work that Greg does, but we use tires as our feedstock. So in 2014, we started a company that takes tires as a waste stream, puts them through a patented technology. Essentially, it's a 40-foot reactor or chamber. We fill them with whole tires. We heat the bottom of that chamber for about 20 minutes with propane, and we start a reaction. Think of it like if you're grilling, you don't light your food on fire, you heat it, and then we use the atmosphere as a catalyst. So this is all under negative pressure. We're sucking atmosphere across a superheated core after we started that for 20 minutes, and we get that bottom red hot. The heat radiates up a stack of about 200 or so tires, and as you know from chemistry, a tire is a semi-solid. We take it through a state change from semi-solid to a gas. We pull that vapor stream out of that reactor, and we put it through a distillation reaction where we just cool it, and we capture a really low-grade, high-sulfur bunker fuel that before recently you could use in shipping internationally. After about 10 or 11 hours, that reaction's done, and I'm left with solid fuel in the form of like a mid-grade Appalachian coal, and there's a lot of steel in car tires. So I have this mid-grade Appalachian kind of coal that I can use as a solid fuel source. I sell the steel. I get paid to take the tires. I have a liquid fuel that I can use and a lot of thermal energy that's transferred as well. So a typical PRTI plant sits on about 5 acres, generates north of 8 megawatts of power. Our costs are around $25 million. I'm a student of Peter Drucker, free market capitalist. You know, my first social responsibility is to make money. And once I make money, I can give it all away. But we are unsubsidized. We don't use any like credits or anything like that. We were just really building a hopefully a sustainable business run on waste fuels. Here's the kicker. There are about 350 million waste tires a year disposed of just in North America. 350 million waste tires a year are disposed of in North America. It's a global problem. What do you do with tires? You bury them, they don't degrade. That's a terrible solution. A lot of them are illegally dumped in waste streams on the side of the road. And then it takes a lot of energy to chop up a tire and dispose of it that way. So you've heard of crumb rubber and things like that. That's an interesting application, but hugely wasteful in terms of power. So what we're doing is we're taking waste tires, we're getting paid for them, you know, a few cents a pound, and you know, our cost of power is less than Greg's, and we mine Bitcoin and Ethereum. If you've read my book, we started our adventure with GPU mining, and we still maintain that as today. I go on, but
I love the theme here is we can call it renewable or sustainable, but you know, I do an energy podcast, and people may follow me on Twitter. I make jokes or memes about renewables sometimes, and it's not that I'm against the theme of sustainability or renewables, but it's one of these things where I see a lot of it being forced. It's a lot of top-down, right? And so what you just mentioned is this free market solution, capitalist-driven solution, to where we're actually reducing waste and being more efficient. And so when I think about what an energy transition is, I think about reducing waste, being more efficient, harvesting more energy out of the resources we have versus kind of government subsidized or top-down mandate type of policies. You know, when you guys think of sustainability, you guys clearly view it through this lens. Is that something that's been easy to get people to buy into, or is it people just want solar and wind and you hear the typical narratives, or how do you guys view sustainability, I guess is the real question.
Yeah, I can start. So I've had a career in energy, you know, and I've been in Texas for 25 years doing like conventional fossil fuel development and financings. And people understand that industry. Obviously, solar, wind, that's here to stay.
Right.
But it really isn't economic without a subsidy.
Sure.
That's the reality of it. But it doesn't really matter. It's being subsidized, and solar and wind is being installed. Look at North Texas. Yeah. It's here. The issue with it is, and the same is true with solar, is when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, what are you going to do? You're going to sit
Right.
in the dark and cold?
Yeah.
You're not. Like, we're not.
No one's
Haiti.
gonna do it.
Yeah, so we need a base load source of power. And the way I think about what Bitcoin mining can do to the energy industry is really help in the transition.
Sure.
By being essentially spinning reserves or acting like a battery. So you could say, hey, mine with Bitcoin using a traditional power source, and develop your wind and solar assets. And when the grid needs that additional energy because the wind isn't blowing, the sun isn't shining, great. A Bitcoin is not an essential service.
Sure.
And it's a global network. It's the biggest network in the world. So great. In areas where the power is needed, redirect the power to the grid. And that is a much more capital efficient way to solve intermittency of renewable resources than batteries.
Absolutely. No, I've said Bitcoin's kind of the battery killer, and I've been saying I get a ton of crap on Twitter for that, but I said it's more economic, right? And it makes sense.
Well, we see it. I think this past weekend we've had, in Pennsylvania where we are based, we had bad weather. Hey, we get a capacity payment from the grid to offer our power to the grid.
Yeah.
And so when the grid needs our power, the grid has it. We shut the data center down, and that makes the grid more reliable, which then makes it possible to install more of these truly, renewable energy assets like the society is describing them.
Right.
But they're really intermittent. So unless you want to be in the dark, what is your base load going to be? And you could study around the world the cost of power. The most expensive power markets are the ones that have the highest percentage of solar and wind.
Right.
So how do you, unless you want to pay 5 times for power, come up with solutions that don't require us to double the capacity of the grid and install these super expensive batteries that aren't that clean anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Jason, your thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, well, I'd also like to say I'm grateful to Chris Hare. He's the acting CEO of PRTI. He's allowed me to speak when he should be up here. But anyway, when we started PRTI, I was fascinated by kind of beginning with the end in mind as one concept. So when things are built, you should build them in such a way as you contemplate their full product life cycle and what happens when they're gone. So a lot of things are built, you don't think about that. So hang that over this discussion for a second. The other thing is if I could lower the cost of power, you kind of lift up humanity. I heard Bill Gates say that in 2013 or 14, and it drove me to want to get involved in, creating decentralized power stations that could be on-grid, off-grid. So I could either do an interconnect and wheel power at 2.5 cents, 4 cents, 7 cents a kilowatt hour, or I could wheel power to a co-tenant, a cement factory or something like that, and just take their cost of power down, right? So when they hit peak load, they could potentially buy power from PRTI. It was the initial thesis. And then Bitcoin mining came along, and we had like the purchaser of all resort. Like it's like there's no sales lead time. If you're generating base power like we are, I can wheel that base power into an ASIC miner or a GPU, and I print money. Like, it was amazing. Now, we're doing that since 2015, but the power market doesn't understand that. They want me to have a purchase power agreement, a PPA in place with some grid, and they didn't get kind of what we were trying to do by building our own decentralized power stations. Like, we own the power component, as Michael Saylor was saying. He's got this like 5-prong thing you have to check the boxes to get through. Well, we had tires. That's our battery or our power source.
Right.
We're getting paid to take it. Wow, that's another check mark, when you get a free fuel source. 3, our kind of the product or the waste that was coming off of the demanufacturing of the tires was power. Were all these kind of combustible fuels and thermal energy. We wheel all that into Bitcoin mining, and it becomes a really cool business where we're, mining Ethereum sub $1,500 a token. We're mining Bitcoin sub his price, and it makes the world fun, but it's very, very hard for the capital players to understand. So we've been raising capital in the private markets. We've funded this thing ourselves. We're expanding internationally. I loved what Saylor said. It's like, Chris, go raise $100 million. Chris, go buy Bitcoin with 75% of the 100 million. Chris, build another plant with the 25 million and keep mining Bitcoin, Chris. It's like we're having a business meeting here in front of 50 people. Sorry.
I was going to, no, you guys hit on a bunch of stuff, and I think they may have cut our time from like 50 minutes to 20, so I'm going to compress some of these questions. And I want to touch on capital markets because I think what you said is a really interesting point. But before we get into that, just the vertical integration aspect of what you guys are doing sounds really cool to people. It's a lot more moving pieces. Like coming from the oil and gas space, it's like, what do you want to do? Do you want to plug in, or do you want to like mine to the center of the earth and like excavate it and then like do all these other things and generate the power and then mine it? Benefits, pros and cons, being vertically integrated, and couple that question with thoughts around alternative revenue streams to offset having to spend your Bitcoin, like you mentioned, demand response or other things like that. So kind of combining two questions there.
Yeah, from my vantage point, being vertically integrated, it's essential for this business.
Yeah.
If you're not vertically integrated, you're going to be captive to
Sure.
power markets, and captive to others.
Right.
And it gives us a giant option that we're not being paid for, but it is also a huge pain in the ass. So
Right.
to run power plants, you wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it if it didn't give us a substantial advantage in terms of power cost.
Sure.
So I think our cost is probably half of the industry average for Bitcoin miners. And we have the benefit when power prices go through the roof, which they occasionally do, we can shut the data center down and divert power to the grid.
Yep.
Also, we're all here because we think Bitcoin has a great future and a great present, but it might not. So what happens to the companies that don't own any power assets and are only Bitcoin miners? They're gone. So, hey, my business makes tens of millions of dollars of cash, regardless of Bitcoin, just because we could sell power to the grid.
Yeah.
So it's the other option is occasionally power prices fall through the floor. And instead of being on a PPA, we can pull power from the grid. We can shut our power plant down and take that cheap power
Right.
and divert it to our miners.
Sure.
So it gives us a massive option on power prices at the same time we're getting a massive option on Bitcoin pricing. So, which is much better than if you're not vertically integrated, what you're doing is you're hoping on high Bitcoin prices. If you don't get it, which sometimes we don't, margins are compressed, and they're going to suffer. So I think, when we see the halving coming up in 2024, and the hash rate growing, I love the mining business. It's a great business today, but it's volatile and it's cyclical. And so I think the more people appreciate the de-risking that the vertically integrated players have, they should trade at a big premium to those that are just merely buying power on a PPA and then hoping for the best. That's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's more difficult. Like owning these assets, we have,
Sure.
it takes
It's a lot.
a lot of people.
Yeah, right.
50 people per plant. It's lots of moving parts. The thing breaks sometimes. It's not
Right.
it's not quite as easy as just sort of buying power from someone else. But hey, the resulting pain in the ass gets us a much cheaper cost to mine Bitcoin and this optionality around Bitcoin price and power price.
Sure. Jason, thoughts?
Yeah, I wouldn't do it any other way. Like you have to control this thing end to end. Like I have to be the power producer to protect getting rug pulled from a
Right.
cost, right? Two, I have to have the controls of the hardware. Three, I have to have control of my fuel source, which that's not going away, I don't believe, anytime soon. And then to your point about like arbitrage, for me, we're a waste management business on the front end. So it's like I was told I just had to be the tallest man in a room full of short people and I could win there. So I'm okay. On the back end, it's really complicated because we can use our solid fuels or sell them. We sell steel as scrap, so that's easy, but it's a commodity. The price changes. We've been around for a long time. If you just think about the market cycles for Brent crude, I've been here from Brent crude at $100 a barrel, Brent crude $27 a barrel, oil negative. So if you were trading futures, it was now a liability. You were stuck on it. And now we're back. I don't know where Brent's trading 90.
92, something.
Yeah, something like that. It's incredible. And so we play in that market as well. So I'm trading solid fuels, liquid fuels, thermal, sell to the grid, be a peaker plant, use all of our fuels to mine Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, trade Bitcoin, hold altcoins, all that stuff. So it's super fun on the back end of this business. I want the complexity. I think the complexity is a huge barrier to entry. And when I see miners, businesses now that are literally just buying power and racking rigs, and I think I could do that tomorrow. I could compete in buying megawatts and running the technology. If I want to buy 8 cent a kilowatt hour power from the grid, I can do that as well and sell all our fuels in a hot market. It gives us a lot more flexibility and complexity, and you can't do what we're doing tomorrow.
Yeah. So our company, in a small way, we own some oil and gas interests in a gathering system, and we're aggregating it. So it's technically vertically integrated, but it adds a lot of. I mean, there's a lot more to it, right? And we will say things like "not my energy, not my Bitcoin." It's like if you're mining, and you don't control the energy, or you're buying it from someone, you always have that counterparty risk that's there, right? That could happen. And so we've got room for about one more question, and we've got a public markets, capital markets, private markets. One thing is a small and trying to grow a Bitcoin mining business. The capital situation does not. I mean, coming from the oil and gas world, in 2018 we went out and raised $200 million. It wasn't that hard. Like you just talk to a few groups that have funds, big funds raised, and private equity can allocate you. Whenever you're in Bitcoin mining, it seems like you either have the public markets or you have what I would call borderline like predatory debt type markets for this space. How do you see it evolving? Are we moving to a future where things are going to open up and startup miners are going to have more access, or just your guys' thoughts on the capital space for mining?
Yeah, I'll hit it. I think if you can meet the ESG narrative, right now you're the hottest girl in the room, or hottest guy in the room, or hottest day in the room.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so we went public last October.
I'm so politically correct now. Like I'm proud of myself.
We went public last October.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that we did. But I think the queue of companies that were trying to go public between last October and now is big and maybe getting bigger. And so I think those that are public have a huge advantage over those that don't because the valuations are gone and the access to public capital is not there today. So I think you'll probably see a bigger gap between valuations of the publics and the privates. So like in any cyclical volatile business, which this is, getting access to capital when the markets are open is super important. So we were in a giant rush to do it, and between our first private financing in early 2021 and our public offering in October 2021, it may be a record in terms of pace, but that was done with the knowledge that hey, the markets sometimes close, and they have. So I think, does it help the mining sector? Those that have capital, whether it be publicly or privately funded, if you have the capital now, you probably want the market to stay closed because the global hash rate will go through the roof if everyone has access to capital.
Yeah. That's what I worry about. My proxy on like the U.S. natural gas market, and so much money came in. People were able to get all this debt. People were producing when prices dropped because supply came up. They still had to produce to pay the notes, to pay off the debt. They could refinance. They had all this access. And I think that if in Bitcoin mining, maybe there could be a scenario, maybe the chips will regulate it somewhat, but there could be a scenario where you get so much access to capital that it artificially brings entrance in and lets them stay profitable longer than they should. And that's something I worry about, just seeing it happen in another industry. But I think we're close on time. Do we have time for questions, or I don't know how tight the schedule is. We're good for questions? Okay. Anybody have anything for these guys? There's mics here. You can. If you don't, I've got a lot more I can ask, but we got some. Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Hello, guys. This is kind of to pick your brain a little bit and try to understand everybody else that is not in the business. We're trying to mine from biogas right now, from pig manure. But what are your thoughts on this new trend where new companies like yours guys are actually harnessing those markets rather than the usual knowledge that we have that miners go to the cheapest sources of energy? This is the other way around, right? So what are your opinions on that trend? Is it going to be larger than we think? Is it going to be a steady amount of more energy being brought back to the Bitcoin mining system, or how do you see it?
Yeah, so I think that mining off of waste, like you're conceptualizing, in North Carolina we have a problem with hog waste. So a lot of hog farming, and we have huge chicken plants as well. So that waste is wet, and it's a problem. It's stored in like lagoons. So if you can and it's highly subsidized as well. If you can solve for that, right, by generating thermal energy, drying those proteins out, and potentially making a fertilizer, but also mining off of the power, the methane that you can produce from it, yeah, it's a great solution, and you should go for that. And you need the subsidies to get it done. And it's technically difficult, but I think it's a worthwhile adventure.
Yeah, I would say if your power cost can't be below, call it 4 or 5 cents, you're not going to get there. It's just if you can go buy power from the grid, in Texas at 2 cents, why are you going to fund something that's double the cost of what's available elsewhere? So if you can drive the power cost down enough, sure, go for it. But I think the reason why we're up here and we're able to get private and public financing is because we could tell the market, hey, our costs, we're doing something good, and our costs are low. Because people don't want to fund a charity. So hopefully your costs can be low enough to do it, and it's better than the alternative of leaving waste in the environment.
You guys just gave me 20 more minutes. Are we good for these 17, I guess? Because I got more questions. Okay, cool. We'll open it back up for questions in a minute. They just threw me off because they cut the time in half. One other one I've got, we talked about the vertical integration around, and everybody is flexing on their all-in power costs, right? Like that's not unique to Jason here on the stage. It's or Greg. It's the entire industry. You talk to Bitcoin miners, and they want to talk about how low their costs are. When I look at a lot of operations, I see a lot of OpEx involved with running large-scale facilities, and I do think that there are benefits to economies of scale in this industry, but do you think that the average Bitcoiner, how do you guys view what all you're rolling into that power cost? Is it just that raw cost of power, or do we have to factor in all these other things? And I use the proxy of oil and gas, but I saw a lot of guys kind of using funny accounting to make it look like a lot cheaper for their lifting costs when really they had all this G&A and all these other things. But just your thoughts around what all needs to be rolled into that cost, and do you think everybody is, like when they throw out these like 1 cent, 2 cent numbers that you hear from lots of people, are they really accounting for all that cost that's going into getting that Bitcoin mined?
I don't want to disparage anybody else, but I would say the industry is in desperate need for standards on both operating costs and CapEx costs.
Right.
Because obviously you can say, hey, my power costs are cheap, but if I spent $3 billion to build an asset to then have cheap power, my all-in costs are high. And so I think you have to look at the cost of the initial CapEx investment and the resulting OpEx savings, and look at it in totality across, a MySpace, Jason's, or the industries. Because right now, everyone's just saying, I have these cheap costs, but they're not including maybe the cost of the transformers, or the cost of the hookup, or the costs that were probably recurring that counted as one time. It's not right now. There isn't enough transparency. I think with my background as a financier in the energy space, all I care about, and I'm a big owner of my public company, so I care about what our return on equity is.
Sure.
And so just like growing for growth's sake won't do it. If it's not economic to grow, and some guys are willing to pay $100 a terahash for machines, they're going to lose money.
Yeah.
But they're going to show growth. And so, hey, at some point the market will figure out that some guys are growing economically and are commercial, and there's some are growing and saying, hey, I want to have a higher hash rate. It's like, well, who cares? If you did it, and if you're losing money doing it, and it'll never make money, who cares what your hash rate is?
Yeah.
So I think right now there's a massive wave of people projecting growth, and they're probably doing it in a marginally economic way. And I can say, hey, that's if you own very little of the equity of your own company, and you have a big option package, of course you're going to do it that way.
Yeah, right.
It's like, hey,
it's like, what are the incentives too? Like, where are the markets? What are they rewarding? What are they?
So I think it's a risky business in that way. So I think it's in need of transparency and standardization on how the true all-in costs are accounted.
Yeah, Jason, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so the cool thing about the programmatic monetary policy of Bitcoin is that it's ruthless every time we have a halving event. And that halving event exposes any inefficient miner to the most severe, savagery, and they go away. They start to liquidate their assets. So I've been around for a while. I've been through some halvings, so I can sit and I can watch, who's been talking, but now they're selling their gear, they're shutting down.
Right.
the inefficient miners are exposed. Those that are efficient, that are operating like Greg's business is, and go into the halving, they benefit dramatically for like 18 months past the halving. They're able to pick up hardware cheap. They're able to pick up stranded power resources and really flex and grow. So I think I agree with everything that Greg said. Unfortunately, I don't have access to public money to shore up the house. You know, we offset our OpEx with a paid fuel source. And I hope that resonates with you because it's friggin' amazing. Like, I get paid like 3 or 4 cents a pound for tires, right? That I then throw into a dumb machine and I cook them up and make some fuels that then we use to mine Bitcoin. I think that's amazing. But for some reason, the galaxy brains over at Goldman Sachs don't understand that.
It's like what it's like what we were just referencing. Is that like when the tide?
Look at Chad brains. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when the tide goes out, we find out who's wearing a bathing suit, right? It's like whenever things are bad, we're gonna find out. What are your guys' thoughts, just like on geographics for Bitcoin mining? You know, you said Pennsylvania; it's kind of a purple type state. Obviously, Texas is getting really popular. You've seen states kind of go both ways. Some people very much adopting it. You've got senators and governors in this state, you know, really being proponents. You've got other states where, like in New York, I think they at least tease the idea of banning it outright. I mean, your guys' thoughts around geography within the U.S. specifically and how that's going to impact miners and what they decide to do, where they decide to deploy.
Hey, there's no place. I think Texas is the most commercial state in the union.
Yeah.
And it has some of the cheap power costs in the United States as well. The issue is it's hotter than shit here in the summertime.
Yeah.
And so I think with the like immersion mining is going to be coming in a big way, and it'll be coming here. And so that's what will have to happen. Right. Otherwise, you'll end up shutting the machines down, you know, for probably months at a time. Or the other alternative is, hey, just run the machines into the ground, and they're not going to last as long as a machine that is in a temperature that's much more reasonable for running these machines. And I think as they get more sophisticated, I think there was some romance to the 10 nanometer chip, where hey, that's just going to be like a workhorse that can handle much tougher environments. As the machines get a little more sophisticated and fast, they're going to get finikier. So I'm not sure you're going to want to run that thing when it's 100 degrees inside and outside. They're going to fail. So, and we have seen generations of machines. Like the S17 was a terrible machine. S19, really pretty good. So I think it's not everyone works like you hope. So like geographically, hey, I love where we are in Pennsylvania, and we employ a lot. We're like the biggest employer and highest paid employer in a couple of counties where we operate. We're running and building that data centers that will have a future beyond Bitcoin if Bitcoin doesn't work or becomes less economic. You know, and I think you could probably look at a few other states as well, but I'm not sure it's really for the regulator to decide how we use our power.
Right.
And we certainly use our power for things much less, romantic than Bitcoin mining. And we don't really, we're going to shut down the casinos. They're not really great for society either.
It's it's like this moralization of energy usage argument, right? It's like that's such a slippery slope.
It doesn't really work here. And I don't think it's legal to really decide.
Right.
Yeah, I think, COVID showed us a few things and created a paradigm shift around, one, the workforce. So it sent everyone home. And then the employers, both large and small, they understood, hey, I still have efficiencies with my employees working from home. Then the employees said, well, I don't want to live in a super dense city that it's a pain in the ass to get to work. So maybe I'll move to some cool place because I'm allowed to work remotely. And then like cities became uber competitive, right? People are moving all over the states or all over the world. And I find it really interesting when mayors reach out to me and ask me to move to their city. Right? I've never heard of such a thing until kind of COVID, right? So I think those same young, progressive, like mayors who want their cities and towns to thrive understand that they need to be competitive in this technological kind of advancement and Bitcoin mining. is interesting and attractive, and there's all these engineers and technologies and money. So, man, I think that what you're going to see is some states choose one side, some states choose another side, and those states that are progressive and embrace technology, and they're going to attract really smart people. And those that don't embrace that will have smart people too, just smart people who don't own Bitcoin. I was going to make one other point. And for me, I have two hurdles. One, setting up data centers isn't always the most attractive thing. So, they see us coming and they charge us more. And then two, I have to set up waste management businesses. So it's not like the most attractive thing in the world that I'm going to haul, 2 million tires in your backyard and run a science experiment that no one understands but thinks it's cool. The good thing about what I'm doing is there's kind of like a tire manufacturing belt in the United States, so it's easy to see where like Goodyear and Michelin and all of them are. And that's where we'll build, 170 PRTI plants just here in North America to try to go after the 350 million waste tires a year. So I'm excited about that.
I think it's like places, I think of mining, it's similar to like places that will adopt Bitcoin, right? Like people say the government's going to ban Bitcoin. It's like, sure, some are going to. And I think it's going to gravitate towards places where people value freedom, pro-business, that have these similar value systems that align with Bitcoin. I think with mining, it's the same way. It's like you can go get really cheap power in Kazakhstan, but it's like, do you want to be subjected to that risk?
No, I love Mongolian warlords hunting birds, and it's awesome.
Yeah. And so I think like with the states, you're going to see it, and it's really interesting and exciting to me to see states getting now competitive, right? Like going after it. It's kind of crazy. And I'm up just 6 hours north in Oklahoma, and we're trying really hard to get them to. I think we're going to get on board here soon and start putting out some things that say that they're pro Bitcoin mining, but no, it's interesting. I think what you guys are doing, the scaled operations that you have, the vertical integration, the alternative energy story, the sustainability story, which to me, this is like the energy transition, right? This is finding new technologies that are free market driven, that are creating something that makes a ton of sense for everybody involved versus just something that we're going to mandate. So I like it. I love the story. I'm happy to interview you guys. We've got about 5 minutes, 6 minutes here for any other questions. If people want to ask them, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Tom Brody. I'm with Harris Energy Group. We're independent hydroelectric producers in the Midwest, and we got into Bitcoin mining about 18 months ago because we had some energy we were selling to the spot market, which wasn't very attractive. Our major hurdle is our hydro plants are small, less than 1.5 megawatts each. So we're running the operations, very small operations, disjointed from each other, and having a problem finding outside capital that wants to talk about smaller stations, data processing outfits.
Let's get back to that question, like the capital side for this. It just seems like you basically, you got to go to private? I mean, kind of high net family office, or?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to run 1.5 megawatts. Is that what you're saying?
At each hydro plant, we have 20 plants.
Right. I mean, you could roll that up and probably raise money on it. I wouldn't do it one-off. I would try to raise the big slug to, do 30 megawatts.
Okay.
Just call me on LinkedIn. I'll probably take it.
All right,
it's actually small. If it's like 20 megawatts, I think the guys that are interested in investing in public markets are looking at plans of 1 gigawatt or more. And so I think, hey, if it works with cash-on-cash returns, so if your power costs are, sub 2 cents, and maybe hydro is that cheap, you should be able to just make money in the private market. But that's probably where I would start. And it doesn't take that much to just reinvest your own cash flow.
That's a good
and
point.
Grow until your capacity is full.
And
That was gonna be-
and we're about 20 petahashes right now. We just use our own cash to grow. And our energy rate is about 2 cents or a little bit less than that on all of our hydro plants.
I was going to say my advice on it, I've done the private equity stuff. I've done self-funded businesses and organically grown businesses. And I think that there's pros and cons to both. Like if you're going to scale faster, you're giving something else up, right? You're going to give up part of that business. You're going to give up part of your economics. So what's important to you is control and having the ability to grow a business in the way that you want to grow it, and have something that you can direct the way you want to direct it. If that's important to you, then I think what Greg mentioned about reinvesting and kind of doing it organically is not a bad thought. And it can have a lot of benefits. But if you really want to scale and you want to make something big, then you probably need to tap outside capital.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
So this question might be a bit more for Jason, but it's for everyone. So I like the models that we're talking about here with some of the alternative, fuel sources to basically get to mining Bitcoin. Are you guys only seeing this in the United States, or are you seeing any particularly interesting international prospects? Because, I've spent a lot of time in Asia, let's say, and there's a lot of these kind of waste sources and animal byproducts and all kinds of stuff. Or is it like only kind of the United States pioneering this right now?
Yeah, so our growth potential is greater out of the United States than in the United States. So we've been to the Netherlands, the Port of Rotterdam. They generate steam power. Creating a bioport in Europe is really interesting. Imagine being able to import waste tires from, island nations or small countries, charging them steep fees for that waste management and generating power for yourself. Germany is another fantastic location for kind of our growth. But I won't give away the house here, but definitely overseas for me.
Yeah, for me, it's just I would maybe chase cheap power in another jurisdiction, but there is truly no country like the United States. And the reason why we're the fastest, growing country for Bitcoin mining is because rule of law works here.
Yeah.
So like rule of law is probably the number one thing. You don't want to be shut down and kicked out involuntarily because these are big investments that we're making. Secondly, it takes time. Like, hey, I live in New York City, and my operations are in Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Pennsylvania. That's enough. Like, I really don't want to have to fly myself to Asia to oversee the build out of another facility until we're exhausted here. Like, hey, we're going to grow, and I will chase the cheap power, but hey, it's pretty like what we have. Like,
Yeah.
we're the cheapest in the industry already. Like, do we need to really,
Yeah.
take months to go set up things in lands where maybe rule of law is different? Because I think at least here, I know who the scoundrels are.
Right.
And how to protect myself from
Yeah,
them. Elsewhere, I don't know who they are.
Right. I think the U.S. too is interesting because we have private property rights for resources, and I think that's the reason why we're the energy leaders in the world. I think that the fact that a private citizen can own minerals underground, can excavate those, turn those into energy, is pretty unique for the world. That being said, there's a ton of waste energy around the world. I mean, you take like flared natural gas. I mean, there's pads on these offshore pads that they just flare all day long. In the Middle East, they flare in some countries more than whole states produce. In a year they flare. So ton of wasted energy that could be done around the world if you live in those places. But to your point, I think if you're here, I'd want to probably play here. I mean, if we can, I don't know. There may be good opportunities, like you said, overseas for your business, but it could be in places that, are easy to, you at least can navigate it, right? Like if you get too off the beaten path, you never know. What else we got? We got another minute.
I got a quick question over here. This
Okay.
is coming live from Clubhouse. American Huddle wanted to ask Jason Williams what the perfect amount of Bitcoin to own is, and why is it 6.15?
Yeah, I knew he was going to say 6.15, and I'll just leave it at that. It is the perfect amount of Bitcoin to own. I'm not going to get into why.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. This is great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for being a good